Chapter 1. The Runt. The wind in the borderlands didn't just blow, it hunted. It slipped through the cracks of the timber cabins, seeking out warmth like a starving wolf seeking a pulse. Alina felt it now, a razor-toothed caress against her cheek as she hauled the water buckets up the frozen incline from the river. The handles were iron, wrapped in rough burlap that had long since worn through, and the cold bit into her palms, threatening to fuse her flesh to the metal. She didn't stop. She couldn't. To stop was to freeze, and to freeze was to die. Or worse, to be found lagging by the packmaster. The settlement of Blackwood was a scar on the edge of the world. To the south lay the lush, verdant territories of the inner packs, where food was plentiful and the winters were merely a season, not a death sentence. To the north lay the barrens, a graveyard of jagged rock and endless snow, where the rogues roamed. The border pack existed between the two, a buffer of unwanted souls and weak bloodlines, tasked with holding the line. Alina's boots crunched loudly on the hard-packed snow. Every step was a battle against gravity and exhaustion. She was 18 winters old, a woman grown by human standards, but in the eyes of the pack, she was less than a pup. She was the runt, the empty vessel. Most wolves shifted by 16. The fever would take them, their bones would break and knit, and they would emerge powerful, connected to the pack mind, part of the great song of the moon. Alina had waited. She had prayed until her knees bled on the cold stone of the sanctuary. But the fever never came. The moon looked down on her with a cold, indifferent white eye, and gave her nothing. Move it. Useless. The growl came from her left. Kale, a brute of a gamma with a scar bisecting his lip, shoved past her. He didn't use his hands. He used his shoulder, checking her hard enough to send her stumbling into a snowdrift. Water sloshed over the rim of the buckets, instantly freezing on her trousers. Watch where you're going. Kale spat, not even breaking stride. Alina didn't retaliate. She didn't glare. She had learned long ago that defiance required teeth, and she had none. She lowered her head, hair falling like a curtain of dirty blonde silk to hide her face, and gripped the handles tighter. Just keep walking. The kitchen is close. She hauled the weight back up, her shoulders screaming. This was her life, the scullery, the laundry, the filth. She was the lowest of the low, kept around only because she had opposable thumbs and could scrub a floor until her fingers were raw. She was invisible until someone needed something to kick. Here, let me. The voice was warm, a stark contrast to the biting wind. A pair of large, calloused hands covered hers, gently prying her fingers from the freezing iron. Alina looked up, and the tightness in her chest unspooled, just a fraction. Mal, he was a beta, but he was built like a bear, broad-shouldered and solid, with hair the color of wheat, and eyes that always held a flicker of summer, even in this endless winter. He was the only thing in Blackwood that didn't look at her with disgust. I have it, Mal, she whispered, though her voice shook. If the Alpha sees you helping the runt again, let him look, Mal said, his jaw setting. He effortlessly hoisted the buckets that had nearly broken her back. You're shivering, Alina. Your lips are blue. It's winter. Everyone is blue. Not like this. He shifted the buckets to one hand, a casual display of strength that made her heart ache with envy, and used the other to pull the collar of her threadbare coat tighter around her throat. His knuckles grazed her jaw, warm and rough. Go inside. Get near the hearth. I'll dump these in the cistern. Mal, you can't be my shield forever, she murmured, looking down at the snow. One day they'll bite through you to get to me. He stepped closer, blocking the wind with his massive frame. Then they'll choke on me first. It was a sweet promise, but a foolish one. Mal was strong, but he was just one beta. In a pack defined by cruelty and hierarchy, kindness was a weakness that eventually got punished. Go, he urged gently. Alina fled toward the kitchens, the only place in the camp that held the memory of heat. The kitchen was a chaotic symphony of clattering pans and shouting cooks. The air was thick with the scent of venison stew and stale grease. Alina took her place at the massive stone basin in the corner, plunging her numb hands into the soapy water. For hours, she scrubbed. She scrubbed until the feeling returned to her fingers in agonizing throbs of pins and needles. She scrubbed until the sun began to dip below the jagged peaks of the mountains, casting long, bruised shadows of purple and gray across the snow. She tried to make herself small, to blend into the stone walls. In her mind, she wasn't here. She was somewhere else, a place she had seen only in tattered books, a place where the sun was warm, and she wasn't the girl with the broken soul. Why am I like this? The question circled her mind like a vulture. What creates a wolf with no wolf inside? The door to the kitchen banged open. The noise wasn't the usual bustle of the dinner rush. It was frantic, violent. A sentry stumbled in, blood dripping from a gash on his forehead. His eyes were wide, the pupils blown distinct with terror. "Rogues!" he screamed, the word tearing out of his throat. "Breach!" "They've breached the northern perimeter." The kitchen froze. For a heartbeat, there was absolute silence, heavy and suffocating. Then, panic erupted. Wolves didn't scream like humans. They snarled. The cooks and servers began to shift, clothes tearing, bones snapping with wet crunches as fur burst through skin. It was a chaotic transformation of fear. Alina stood frozen at the sink, the soapy water dripping from her hands. She had no wolf to call. She had no claws to extend. She was a rabbit in a den of turning vipers. Alina. Mal was there before she could process the danger. He grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. He hadn't shifted yet, but his eyes were glowing a bright, incandescent amber. "We have to move," he commanded, pulling her toward the back exit. "The perimeter is gone. They're swarming. But the shelter... No time. They're already inside the compound." As if to punctuate his words, a massive body crashed through the main window. Glass shattered, spraying across the stew pots. A creature landed on the prep table, a wolf. But wrong. It was a rogue. Its fur was patchy and matted with filth, its ribs showing through mange-ridden skin. Foam dripped from its jaws, and its eyes burned with a feverish, red madness. The stench hit Alina like a physical blow, sulfur, rot, and old blood. The rogue snarled, snapping at a shifting cook, tearing into the half-formed shoulder muscle. The scream was human and horrifying. "Run!" Mal roared, shoving Alina out the back door. They burst into the freezing twilight. The settlement was a war zone. The sounds of battle were everywhere, deep, guttural growls, the wet tear of flesh, the high-pitched yelps of the injured. The snow was being painted in vivid, steaming streaks of crimson. The root cellar. Mal panted, dragging her toward a small structure half buried in the earth near the edge of the forest. "It has an iron bolt. You'll be safe there." "What about you?" Alina cried, stumbling as her boots slipped on the icy ground. "I'll hold the door." They were 10 yards from the cellar when the shadows detached themselves from the tree line. 3 of them. Massive, hulking shapes that moved with a twitching, unnatural speed. They cut off the path to the cellar, circling wide. These weren't just starving exiles. They were feral, driven by the madness that consumed wolves who spent too long in the barrens without a pack anchor. Mal skidded to a halt, putting Alina behind him. He pushed her back toward the woodpile. "Stay behind me. Do not make a sound. Mal, there are 3 of them." Alina's voice was a high, thin wire of terror. "I said stay back." Mal didn't wait. He stripped his shirt off in one motion, and the change took him. It was fast the mark of a warrior, his spine cracked and elongated, his jaw pushed forward, and in seconds, a large, golden-brown wolf stood in his place. He was big, but the rogues were monsters. The first rogue lunged. Mal met it in the air, a clash of teeth and fur. They rolled in the snow, snapping at throats. Mal managed to throw the creature off, ripping a chunk of fur from its flank, but the second one was already flanking him. Alina pressed her back against the rough bark of the woodpile, her hands clamping over her mouth to stifle a scream. She watched, helpless, useless, as the only person who had ever loved her fought for his life. Mal was brave. He fought with the discipline of a trained guardian, using his weight to knock the second rogue off balance. But he was tired, and they were relentless. The third rogue, the largest of the pack with a missing ear and eyes like coagulated blood, saw the opening. While Mal was pinning the second wolf, the third one struck from behind. Jaws clamped down on Mal's hind leg. There was a sickening crack of bone. Mal howled, a sound of pure agony that shattered Alina's heart. He went down, thrashing. The three rogues descended on him like piranhas. They weren't fighting for dominance, they were tearing him apart. No, the scream ripped from Alina's throat before she could stop it. Male. She didn't think. She didn't calculate the odds. She grabbed a piece of firewood, a heavy, frozen log, and ran forward. It was suicide. She knew it. She was a frail human girl running into a blender of fangs. She swung the log with all her meager strength, bringing it down on the skull of the rogue biting Mal's neck. The wood connected with a dull thud. The rogue didn't even flinch. It stopped chewing, slowly turned its massive, gore-slicked head, and looked at her. The intelligence in its red eyes was gone, replaced by a bottomless hunger. It released Mal, whose golden fur was now matted dark with blood. Mal whined, trying to rise, but his back leg dragged uselessly. Run. Mal's mind-link voice was faint, a whisper in her head that shouldn't have been possible for a runt to hear. Alina. Run. She couldn't. Her legs had turned to water. The rogue stepped over Mal's prone body, stalking toward her. It opened its jaws, and she could see the strings of saliva, the yellowed, rotting teeth. It smelled of the grave. It crouched, muscles bunching for the lethal spring. Alina squeezed her eyes shut. I'm sorry, Mal, I'm so sorry. She felt the displacement of air as the beast leaped. She felt the heat of its breath, terror, cold and absolute, converted into something else inside her chest. It wasn't the fever of the shift. It wasn't the physical breaking of bones. It was a pressure, like a dam breaking, a supernova exploding in the cavity where her wolf should have been. No, she screamed. But it wasn't a human scream. A shockwave blasted outward from her body. It was invisible, yet it hit the physical world with the force of a hurricane. The snow around her instantly vaporized into steam. The rogue, mid-air, was slammed backward as if hit by a wrecking ball. It crashed into the other two wolves, sending them tumbling across the ice. Alina opened her eyes. The world looked different, sharper. The night wasn't dark anymore. It was vibrant, etched in high-contrast grays and silvers. She looked down at her hands. She was still human. No claws, no fur, but the air around her was vibrating, humming with a terrifying, heavy static. The rogues scrambled to their feet, shaking their heads, ready to attack again. But as they looked at her, they froze. The largest rogue, the one that had mauled Mal, lowered its head, its ears flattened against its skull. It let out a high-pitched whine, its tail tucking deeply between its legs. It scraped its belly against the snow, trembling violently, not in aggression, but in abject paralytic submission. Alina took a step forward, the ground beneath her boot cracked. She felt a strange sensation in her eyes, a burning cold. She didn't know that they were glowing, not the amber of a beta or the yellow of an omega, but a blinding, molten silver. Leave, she whispered. Her voice sounded doubled, layered with a growl that vibrated in the marrow of everyone who heard it. The rogues didn't hesitate. They didn't test her. Terrified by the raw, suffocating aura of pure alpha authority pouring off the small girl, they scrambled backward, tripping over themselves to flee into the darkness of the barrens. Silence slammed back down onto the clearing. The pressure in Alina's chest vanished as quickly as it had come, leaving her hollowed out. The silver faded from her vision. The world plunging back into darkness. Her knees buckled. Alina. She turned her head. Mal had shifted back to human form. He was naked, shivering violently, his leg a ruin of torn flesh and white bone. But he wasn't looking at his wound. He was staring at her, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and awe. Alina, he rasped, blood bubbling at his lips. What? What are you? She couldn't answer. The exhaustion took her, dragging her down into the black snow. The last thing she felt was the biting cold, and the terrified realization that the monster the rogues had run from was her. Chapter 2. The Alpha King's Mate. The silence that followed the rogues' retreat was not peaceful. It was the breathless, fragile silence of a lung about to collapse. Alina knelt in the snow, her hands hovering over Mal's ruined leg. The adrenaline that had turned her blood to quicksilver was gone, replaced by a shaking terror so profound she could barely draw breath. The snow beneath Mal was no longer white. It was a slush of crimson mud, steaming in the frigid air. "Mal," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Stay with me, please, stay with me." Mal's face was gray, the color of old ash. His eyes, usually so warm, were unfocused, glazing over with the onset of shock. "Alina, your eyes," he mumbled, his words thick with blood. You glowed. Don't talk about that. Just breathe." She ripped the hem of her tunic, the fabric tearing with a sharp rip, and tried to bind the wound. It was useless. The muscle was shredded, the femoral artery nicked. The blood pumped out in steady, horrifying pulses. Around them, the settlement of Blackwood was beginning to stir. Survivors were crawling out from the wreckage of the kitchens and the bunkhouses. Moans of pain began to weave together into a tapestry of misery, but no one came to help the Runt and the Beta. They were on the periphery, as always. Then, the vibration started. It wasn't a sound at first. It was a tremor in the ground, deep and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of the mountain itself. The pebbles near Alina's knees began to dance. Mal's eyes widened, clearing for a split second. Fear, sharper and more lucid than his fear of the rogues, seized him. "Hide," he rasped, grabbing her wrist with a bloody hand. "Alina, hide. I'm not leaving you. It's not the rogues," he choked out. "It's him." Before she could ask who him was, the air changed. The biting wind died instantly. The clouds above, which had been churning with a coming storm, seemed to freeze in place. The atmosphere grew heavy, dense with a suffocating pressure that tasted of ozone and ancient, metallic iron. From the tree line to the south, the direction of the civilized world, the direction of the crown shadows emerged. But these were not the ragged, feral shadows of the rogues. These were uniform, disciplined, terrifying. 12 wolves. They were massive, easily twice the size of any wolf in the border pack. Their fur was uniformly black, slick, and thick, absorbing the meager moonlight. They moved in perfect synchronization, a phalanx of death. They wore collars of hammered silver, etched with runes that glowed faintly in the gloom. The royal guard. And in the center, walking on 2 legs, was a man. He didn't need to shift to command the space. He wore a long coat of black wool that billowed behind him like a dark wing, the collar lined with the fur of a beast Alina couldn't name. He was tall, towering over the guard, his breadth enormous. Alina couldn't see his face clearly from the distance, but she felt him. The power rolling off him was a physical weight. It crushed the air from her lungs. It slammed into the earth, demanding obedience. Around the settlement, every surviving wolf of the Blackwood pack dropped. It wasn't a choice. It was the command. The biological imperative hardwired into their DNA that forced them to bow before the apex. Gammas fell to their knees. Even the packmaster, a cruel man who had beaten Alina more times than she could count, collapsed face first into the snow, whining like a kicked puppy. Alina felt the pressure hit her shoulders like a granite slab. Her knees slammed into the ice. She gasped, fighting the urge to press her forehead to the ground, fighting the instinct to bare her neck. "Why? Why is it so heavy?" The man walked through the carnage. He didn't look at the wounded. He didn't step around the bodies. He stepped over them, indifferent as a god walking through an anthill. He stopped in the center of the clearing. The 12 black wolves flanked him, statues of lethal intent. Disappointing. The word was spoken softly, a deep baritone that carried effortlessly across the silent camp. It was smooth, cultured, and colder than the grave. "A border garrison," the man continued, turning slowly to survey the ruin, "tasked with the defense of the realm. And yet, 3 feral mongrels breached your perimeter and slaughtered half your number." He looked down at the packmaster, who was groveling in the mud. My king, the packmaster blubbered, not daring to look up. We were caught unaware. The winter, the supplies. Excuses are the language of the weak, the king said. He didn't raise his voice. He simply flicked his hand. A wave of darkness, actual, tangible shadows rippled from his fingers. It struck the packmaster. There was a sickening crunch, a wet gurgle, and the man went silent, his neck twisted at an unnatural angle. Alina clamped her hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. He had killed their leader without touching him, just a flick of his wrist. Cull the injured, the king commanded, turning his back on the corpse. If they cannot survive a skirmish with rogues, they are of no use to the crown. Burn the bodies. We rebuild the garrison with fresh blood in the morning. The royal guard began to move, prowling toward the wounded who lay moaning in the snow. No, Alina whispered. She looked at Mal. He was breathing shallowly, his life leaking out into the snow. If the guard found him, they would kill him. They would see a broken beta and end him. No, she said, louder this time. She scrambled to cover Mal with her own body. She was small, shivering, and powerless, but she spread her arms over his chest, shielding him from the encroaching darkness. The king froze. He hadn't seen her yet. She was just a heap of rags in the shadows near the woodpile. But as she moved, the wind shifted. It picked up the scent of her fear, the scent of her sweat, and carried it across the clearing. The king's head snapped toward her with the speed of a viper strike. He went perfectly still. The casual arrogance vanished, replaced by a rigid, predatory tension. He inhaled, deeply, his chest expanding against the black wool. Wait, he growled. The guard froze instantly. The king turned his body fully toward her. He took a step, then another. His pace accelerated, his stride eating up the distance between them. He wasn't walking anymore. He was hunting. Alina shrank back, pressing herself against Mal. "Don't touch him," she cried, her voice shrill and terrified. "Please, don't touch him." The king stopped 5 feet from her. Up close, he was devastating. His face was sharp angles and harsh lines, carved from marble and moonlight. His hair was black as a raven's wing, swept back from a high forehead. But it was his eyes that froze Alina's heart. They were pitch black. No iris. No pupil. Just an endless, consuming void of darkness. He stared at her. He wasn't looking at the blood on her hands. He wasn't looking at the dying boy beneath her. He was looking at her. He was dissecting her. "What is this?" he murmured, his voice strained, vibrating with a leashed violence. He inhaled again, his nostrils flaring. Winter sunshine and wild lilies. Alina trembled. "Please, my lord, he's hurt. He needs a healer. Please." The king ignored her words. He dropped to one knee in the snow, heedless of the gore. He was so large that even kneeling, he was nearly at eye level with her. The aura of power rolling off him was intoxicating and terrifying, a mix of dark chocolate, charred wood, and rain. He reached out. His hand was gloved in black leather. He moved slowly, as if approaching a frightened deer. Alina flinched, squeezing her eyes shut, expecting a blow, expecting the same darkness that had killed the packmaster. Instead, she felt the leather touch her cheek. It was a touch so gentle it barely registered. He traced the line of her jaw, his thumb brushing away a smear of dirt. Alina opened her eyes. The pitch black of his eyes was swirling, the darkness churning like smoke. Deep within that void, a tiny pinprick of gold began to ignite. "Mine," he whispered. The word wasn't spoken to her. It was spoken to the universe. It was a fact stated with the absolute certainty of gravity. A shockwave went through Alina. It wasn't the alpha aura this time. It was a hook, sinking into her navel and pulling. A strange, hot thread connected her chest to his. It was the most terrifying sensation she had ever felt, a sudden, violent belonging. "What?" she breathed. The king's hand moved to the back of her neck. He gripped her there, possessive, firm. He leaned in, burying his face in the crook of her neck, right where her pulse hammered against her skin. He inhaled deeply, a shudder racking his massive frame. "Mate," The growl tore out of his chest, deep and guttural, vibrating through her bones. Alina stopped breathing. Mate, the word echoed in the silence of the clearing. Every wolf within hearing distance went rigid. The king had found his mate. Here, in the mud and the blood of a border outpost, the king pulled back, but he didn't let go of her neck. The gold in his eyes was spreading, warring with the black lust. You, he said, his voice rough. What is your name? Alina, she stammered. Alina. He tasted the name, rolling it on his tongue. You are freezing. He moved with blurring speed. In one motion, he unclasped his heavy wool coat and wrapped it around her. It engulfed her, heavy and warm, smelling overwhelmingly of him. Get up, he commanded. It wasn't the Alpha command, but it was close. Alina scrambled to her feet, clutching the coat. But she didn't step away from Mal. She looked down at him. Mal was staring up at the king with a look of pure horror. No, Mal wheezed, trying to lift his hand. Don't take her. The king's gaze flicked to Mal. The tenderness vanished instantly. The void returned. He is dying, the king said, his voice flat. Save him. Alina begged, grabbing the king's forearm. The leather was smooth under her fingers. Please. You have healers. You have magic. Save him. The king looked at her hand on his arm, then back at her face. He seemed fascinated by her boldness. He is a beta, the king said dismissively. He failed to protect the settlement. He failed to protect you. He saved my life. Alina screamed, finding a sudden hysterical courage. He is the only one who ever cared if I lived or died. If you let him die, I will never forgive you. Never. The guards stiffened. No one spoke to King Kirigan like that. No one. Kirigan stared at her. His jaw ticked. He looked at the pathetic, broken form of Mal, and then back at the fierce, trembling girl wrapped in his coat. You bargain with your king, he asked softly. I bargain with my mate, she countered, the words tasting strange and heavy in her mouth. Something sparked in Kirigan's eyes. Amusement? Pride? Very well, he said. He didn't look at Mal. He looked at the captain of his guard. Stabilize the beta. Take him to the infirmary wagons. Alina sagged with relief. Thank you. Thank you. She turned to kneel beside Mal again, to reassure him, but Kirigan's arm shot out, wrapping around her waist like an iron band. He hauled her back against his chest, lifting her feet off the ground. Where are you going? He growled against her ear. I need to stay with him. No, the word was absolute. He is a beta, Kirigan said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, possessive rumble. He is beneath you. You are the queen. You do not kneel in the mud for a servant. He is my friend. Alina struggled, kicking her legs, but she might as well have been fighting a mountain. He was your past, Kirigan said. He turned, walking away from the scene, carrying her effortlessly with one arm. I am your future. Mal! She screamed, watching as the guards approached Mal, roughly lifting him onto a stretcher. Mal reached out a hand toward her, his fingers grasping at the empty air. Alina. Mal's cry was weak, swallowed by the wind. Kirigan didn't stop. He walked toward a massive black carriage that waited at the edge of the forest, drawn by 4 nightmarish horses with burning eyes. Put me down, Alina demanded, hitting Kirigan's chest. You can't just take me. Kirigan stopped at the carriage door. He looked down at her, and the intensity of his gaze silenced her. I have waited 400 years for you, he said. The darkness in his voice was terrifyingly honest. I would burn this world to ash before I let you go. He opened the door and tossed her inside onto the velvet seats. He climbed in after her, filling the space, blocking out the light, blocking out the snow, blocking out Mal. As the carriage lurched into motion, pulling her away from the only home she had ever known, Alina realized the truth. The rogues had wanted to kill her. The king wanted to keep her, and she wasn't sure which fate was worse. Chapter 3. The Obsidian Den. The carriage ride was a blur of silence and shadow. For hours, they rumbled over paved roads that were smoother than anything Alina had ever experienced in the borderlands. Outside, the scenery shifted from the jagged, wild pines of the frontier to something ancient and cultivated. Kirigan did not speak. He sat across from her, his long legs stretched out, watching her with that same terrifying, predatory intensity. He didn't touch her again, but the air between them crackled with the heavy static of the mate bond. It was a physical weight, a hook in her chest that tugged her toward him every time the carriage swayed. When they finally stopped, it was deep in the night. Alina peered out the window and gasped. The obsidian den was not a castle built on a mountain, it was carved into one. The structure was a monolithic spire of black rock that rose from the earth like a jagged tooth. It was seamless, the walls polished to a shine that reflected the moon. Towers spiraled upward, connected by impossible bridges of stone, and the windows glowed with the warm, treacherous light of 1,000 hearths. "Welcome home," Kirigan murmured. The door opened, and the cold mountain air rushed in, but it was instantly blocked by Kirigan's body as he exited. He reached a hand in for her. Alina hesitated. Her hands were still stained with dried blood, Mal's blood. "Come," he commanded softly. She took his hand. She had no choice. Inside, the den was a labyrinth of Gothic splendor. The ceilings were vaulted, lost in shadow, and the floors were black marble that looked like deep water. Alina was separated from the king almost immediately. He handed her over to a retinue of women with sharp smiles and eyes that assessed her worth in a single glance. "This way," the lead woman said. She was tall, beautiful, with hair like spun copper and the scent of a high-ranking alpha female. She looked at Alina's rags with undisguised sneer. "The king requires you to be cleansed." They took her to a bath chamber that was larger than the entire bunkhouse she had grown up in. The tub was carved from a single block of white quartz, filled with steaming water that smelled of lavender and sulfur. For the next hour, Alina was scrubbed, oiled, and polished. The women were not gentle. They scrubbed her skin until it was pink and raw, muttering in low voices that they didn't bother to hide. "This is the one," a brunette whispered, roughly combing the tangles from Alina's hair. "She looks like a starved rat." "Careful," the redhead warned, though her eyes were mocking. "The king claims she is mate. You know the law. A mistake, surely. Look at her ribs. She's a runt. She doesn't even have a scent." Alina said nothing. She sat in the water, letting them talk. She was used to being invisible, used to being the object of scorn. She closed her eyes and tried to find the thread of Mal in her mind. But the bond with the king was so loud, so overwhelming, that it drowned out everything else. When they were finished, they dressed her in a gown of silver silk that felt like water against her skin. It was simple but elegant, leaving her arms and neck bare. "Stay here," the redhead commanded, pointing to a velvet chaise by the fire. "Do not wander. The king will come when he is ready." They left her alone. The silence of the room was heavy. Alina walked to the window, looking out over the valley below. It was a long way down. Planning an escape. Alina spun around. Kirigan was standing in the doorway. He had changed. Gone was the military wool coat. He now wore a loose white shirt, unbuttoned at the top, and black trousers. He looked less like a king and more like a man, a dangerous, beautiful man. He closed the door behind him. The lock clicked with a sound of finality. "I don't know where I am," Alina said, her voice small in the vast room. "How could I escape?" "Smart girl." He walked toward her. The firelight danced in his pitch-black eyes. "You look better without the mud." He stopped inches from her. He reached out, his fingers ghosting over the curve of her shoulder. Alina shivered, betraying herself. "Why me?" she whispered. "I'm nobody. I'm the runt. I'm 18 and I haven't even shifted. I'm broken." Kirigan laughed. It was a low, dark sound that vibrated in the floorboards. "Broken," he shook his head. "They told you that you were broken because they were too weak to understand what you are." He circled her, his movements fluid, like a wolf stalking prey. "Do you know why you haven't shifted, Alina?" "Because I'm weak." "No." He stopped behind her. His breath was hot on her ear. Because a vessel that small cannot contain the power of a white wolf without preparation. Alina froze. White wolf. They are myths to most, Kirigan whispered. Legends. Wolves born once in a millennium. They are not just strong, they are amplifiers. Their very presence makes the pack stronger, faster, more lethal. You are a living conduit of the moon's power. He placed his hands on her waist. His grip was firm, possessing. Your body held the shift back to protect you. If you had shifted in that freezing hovel, surrounded by weaklings who would have feared you, you would have burned them all to ash. He spun her around to face him. You aren't a runt, Alina. You are a weapon. And you were waiting for a hand strong enough to wield you. Alina looked up at him, her mind reeling. A white wolf? It was impossible. And yet, she remembered the blast of power in the forest. The way the rogues had cowered. But the rogues, she stammered. They ran from me. They ran from the queen. Kirigan corrected. He stepped closer, eliminating the space between them. The scent of him, rain and dark earth, flooded her senses. It was intoxicating. Her inner wolf, the one she thought didn't exist, was scratching at the surface, desperate to be near him. But you are in danger, he said, his voice dropping to a serious, grave tone. A white wolf is a prize. Every alpha from here to the Southern Isles would kill to possess you. They would chain you in a basement and use you to breed an army of super soldiers. Alina's blood ran cold. And you won't. Kirigan's eyes narrowed. He looked offended, hurt even. He cupped her face in his large hands, forcing her to look into the endless dark of his eyes. I am your mate, he said fiercely. I do not want to use you, Alina. I want to cherish you. I want to give you the world that denied you. He ran his thumb over her lower lip. But to keep you safe, I must claim you. I must make it clear to every wolf in this castle that you belong to me. Wholly. Irrevocably. How? She breathed. Scenting. He didn't wait for permission. He tilted her head back, exposing the long, pale column of her throat. Alina's breath hitched. This was intimate. This was something lovers did. Wolves had scent glands on their wrists and necks. To rub one's scent on another was a primitive, undeniable warning. Taken. Kirigan lowered his head. He didn't bite, not yet, but he pressed his face into the hollow of her throat. He groaned. A deep, vibrating sound of satisfaction. He rubbed his cheek against her skin, slow and deliberate, coating her in his pheromones. Mine. He growled against her skin. My scent is on you now. Any male who smells this will know that to touch you is to invite death. He moved lower, nuzzling the sensitive skin of her collarbone. Alina's knees went weak. Her hands involuntarily came up to grip his shirt. Her body was betraying her. The bond was screaming at her to submit, to bare her neck, to let him take everything. You smell like winter sunshine, he murmured, his lips brushing her skin. And now? You smell like me? He pulled back slowly, his eyes heavy with lust. The pack will smell you on me, and me on you. Tomorrow, you will sit by my side. You will not bow to anyone, they will bow to you. Alina felt dizzy. It was too much, too fast. And Mal? She asked, the name a sudden anchor in the storm of his seduction. Kirigan's expression hardened instantly. The lover vanished. The king returned. The beta lives, he said coldly. Because I granted it, do not test my generosity by speaking another male's name in my bedchamber. He stepped back, breaking the physical contact. The loss of his heat was a physical ache. Sleep now, he commanded. Tomorrow is the full moon. Tomorrow we see if you can survive your first shift. He turned and walked to the door. Before he left, he looked back at her. Do not try to leave this room, Alina. The castle is full of wolves who would tear you apart if they didn't smell me on you. I am the only safety you have. He closed the door. Alina stood alone in the silence, the scent of rain and dark earth clinging to her skin like a second soul. She walked to the mirror. She looked the same, but her eyes seemed brighter, and on her neck, where he had rubbed his scent, The skin felt hot. She was a white wolf. She was a queen, but as she looked at the locked door, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was just a bird in a very expensive cage. Chapter 4. The First Shift and the Mating Run. The moon did not rise. It invaded. Alina felt it long before it crested the peaks of the obsidian den. It started as a low hum in the marrow of her bones, a vibration that matched the frantic rhythm of her heart. For years, she had stood under the full moon and felt nothing but the cold bite of failure. Tonight, the moon felt like a physical hand reaching down to drag her inside out. She paced the length of her chamber. Her skin felt too tight, as if she were wearing a garment that had suddenly shrunk 3 sizes. Her senses were dialed up to an excruciating frequency. The crackle of the fire sounded like a tree snapping. The scent of the beeswax candles was choking her. "It's coming," she thought, panic clawing at her throat. "The fever." She collapsed onto the fur rug before the hearth, clutching her stomach. A wave of heat rolled through her, followed instantly by a shivering cold. It was the same sickness she had watched other wolves endure at 16, the prelude to the breaking. But this was violent. It felt ancient. The door clicked open. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. The scent of rain and dark earth filled the room, overpowering the wax and the smoke. "Breathe, Alina." Kirigan was there, kneeling beside her. He had stripped down to his trousers, his chest bare and gleaming in the firelight. Muscles coiled under his skin, tension radiating from him in waves. His eyes were fully black, the gold flecks swirling like stars in a void. "It hurts," she gasped, her back arching as a spasm of pain shot up her spine. "It feels like I'm dying." "You are dying," he murmured, his voice a dark caress. He ran a hand down her spine, his touch scorching. "The human girl is dying. The queen is being born. Let her go." I don't know how." "Stop fighting it." He moved behind her, pulling her back against his chest. He was solid, an anchor in the storm of her body. "You have spent your whole life holding yourself together, terrified of taking up space. Break, Alina. Shatter." Another wave hit her. A audible crack echoed in the room. Her shoulder blade. Alina screamed. A raw, guttural sound that wasn't entirely human. Kirigan didn't flinch. He leaned close to her ear, his voice dropping to a growl that vibrated through her ribs. "That's it! Give it to me! Give me the pain!" He placed his hands on her shoulders, right over the breaking bones. Shadows seeped from his fingertips, living, inky tendrils that sank into her skin. They didn't stop the pain, but they dulled the terror. They wrapped around her fracturing skeleton, holding her together even as she fell apart. "Look at the moon," he commanded. Alina dragged her eyes to the window. The full moon was there, huge and heavy, hanging over the valley like a white eye. It called to her, "Sister, daughter, wolf." The dam broke. Alina threw her head back, and the scream turned into a howl. Her body contorted, reshaping itself with wet, tearing sounds. The silver silk of her gown shredded as white fur burst through her skin, her jaw elongated, teeth sharpening into daggers. Her hands clawed at the rug, fingers fusing into paws, nails turning into obsidian claws. It was agony. It was ecstasy. And then, it was over. She stood on 4 legs, panting heavily. The room looked different. The colors were gone, replaced by a hyper-detailed monochrome of grays and silvers. She could smell the dust motes in the air. She could hear the heartbeat of a mouse in the walls. She looked down at herself. Her paws were massive, twice the size of a normal wolf's. Her fur was pure, blinding white, not the dirty cream of winter coats, but the incandescent white of starlight. She glowed, a faint luminescence radiating from her pelt that lit up the darkened corners of the room. A low, appreciative growl rumbled behind her. She turned. Kirigan was shifting. His transformation was fluid, practiced, a ripple of darkness. Where the man had stood, a monster now rose. He was a shadow wolf. He was enormous, his shoulders brushing the height of the mantelpiece. His fur was absolute black, absorbing the light she cast. He was a creature of nightmares, massive and lethal, with eyes that burned like dying suns. He stepped toward her. The floorboards groaned under his weight. He lowered his massive head, sniffing her. He nudged her neck, his wet nose cold against her hot fur. "Beautiful," his voice echoed in her mind. It wasn't spoken. It was felt. A dark reverence. "My white wolf," Alina huffed, shaking out her new coat. She felt incredible. The weakness of the runt was gone. In its place was a surging, boundless power. She felt light enough to fly and strong enough to crush stone. Kirigan moved to the balcony doors. He reared up, unlatching them with a paw, and the cold night air rushed in. "Run," he commanded. He didn't wait. He launched himself off the balcony, plummeting into the darkness below. Alina didn't hesitate. Her instincts took over, ancient, predatory, joyful. She leaped. They landed on the snowy slope of the mountain, paws sinking deep into the powder. Alina expected to stumble, but she didn't. She was built for this. She ran. It was a blur of speed and sensation. The wind was no longer an enemy. It was a plaything. She tore through the forest, the trees whipping past her like ghosts. She felt the muscles in her haunches bunch and release, propelling her forward with terrifying velocity. She wasn't just running, she was hunting the horizon. Kirigan was beside her, a black shadow matching her stride for stride. He was faster, stronger, but he held back, letting her lead. He was herding her, guiding her deeper into the royal territory. They reached the valley floor, a vast expanse of frozen meadow bathed in moonlight. Here, the game changed. Kirigan let out a challenging bark and surged ahead. He wasn't guiding her anymore, he was enticing her. "Catch me," the Bond whispered, taunting and seductive. Alina growled, a playful, fierce sound. She pushed harder, her claws tearing up the earth. This was the mating run. A primal dance of dominance and submission, of chase and capture. She closed the distance. She was an amplifier. She could feel her own power feeding him, making him faster, and his power feeding her, making her bolder. They were a feedback loop of magic. She lunged, snapping at his flank. He dodged, weaving through a cluster of pines. She cut him off, banking hard off a tree trunk, and slammed into him. They rolled in the snow, a tangle of black and white limbs, snarling and nipping. It wasn't violent, it was foreplay. He pinned her, his massive weight pressing her into the ice, his teeth grazing the sensitive fur of her throat. Alina went still, baring her neck. It was an instinct she couldn't fight. Submission to the alpha, submission to the mate. He didn't bite. He licked the spot where her pulse thundered, his tongue rough and hot. "Mine," the voice in her head growled. "Forever." He released her, and they were off again, running until their lungs burned and the moon began its descent. They ran until the human world was a distant memory, and there was only the snow, the scent of pine, and the wolf beside her. They shifted back just before dawn, in a secluded grove near a frozen waterfall. The return to human form was softer this time, a reluctant shedding of perfection. Alina collapsed onto the mossy bank, gasping for air. She was naked, her skin glowing pink in the early light, steam rising from her body. She felt drunk. The endorphins were flooding her system, masking the cold. She felt alive in a way she never had before. "You were magnificent." Kirigan was leaning against a rock, watching her. He was also naked, unashamed, his body a masterpiece of scars and muscle. He looked satisfied, the tension from earlier completely gone. He walked over to where his clothes had been stashed. He had prepared for this. He pulled out a heavy fur cloak and draped it over her shoulders, pulling her to her feet. I've never felt anything like that," Alina whispered, clutching the fur. Her eyes were wide, shining with the lingering silver of the wolf. "The power. It's endless." "It is," Kirigan agreed. He reached into the pocket of his discarded coat. "But it is also dangerous. A new wolf, especially one of your magnitude, can lose herself. The beast can take over the mind." He pulled out a necklace. It was exquisite and terrifying. It was made of small, polished segments of bone ivory and old strung on a chain of woven silver. In the center hung a pendant carved from a dark, iridescent material that looked like a stag's antler, but black. "What is it?" Alina asked, mesmerized by the way the black antler seemed to drink the light. "An amplifier," he lied smoothly. "And an anchor. It is an heirloom of my house, crafted by the first Alpha King. It will help you control the shift. It will keep the human Alina from drowning in the white wolf." He stepped behind her. "Lift your hair." Alina obeyed. She trusted him. He had given her the moon. He had given her a wolf. He had saved her from the Runt's life. She lifted her heavy, tangled hair, exposing her neck. Kirigan placed the cold bone against her skin. "For your protection," he whispered. He fastened the clasp. Click. The sound was sharp, final. The moment the necklace locked, a cold sensation seeped into Alina's skin. It wasn't the cold of the weather. It was a numbing frost that went straight to her nervous system. She gasped, stumbling forward. "It's cold. It will pass," Kirigan said. He didn't step back. He kept his hands on her shoulders, his grip tightening. Alina tried to reach for her inner wolf, to share this feeling. But she hit a wall. A glass wall. She could feel the wolf. It was still there, pacing, powerful, but it felt distant, muted. And more than that, she felt a sudden, overpowering urge to lean back into him, to agree, to obey. "Does it feel heavy?" he asked softly. "A little," she murmured. Her thoughts felt sluggish, like wading through syrup. "Kirigan, I feel strange." "Shh." He turned her around and kissed her forehead. "You are just tired. The first shift takes a toll." He looked at the necklace. The black antler pendant was pulsing faintly, a heartbeat that matched his own. He hadn't told her the truth. It wasn't an anchor for her humanity. It was a bridle for her beast. The bone was from a creature of the barrens, steeped in binding magic. It tied her wolf's will directly to his command. She would still have the power, but he would have the reins. "Come," he said, scooping her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing. "Let us go home, my queen." Alina rested her head on his shoulder. The uneasiness was there, scratching at the back of her mind, but the necklace hummed a soothing, narcotic song. Safe, protected. She closed her eyes, unaware that the chain around her throat was the first link in a cage she wouldn't see until it was too late. Chapter 5. The Blood Curse. The days that followed the first shift were a haze of velvet and lethargy. Alina floated through the obsidian den like a ghost caught in a beautiful dream. The necklace Kirigan had given her, the black antler set in silver, felt heavy against her throat, a constant, cooling weight that seemed to seep into her bloodstream. It made her thoughts slow. It made the sharp edges of her fear dull. She spent her time in the library, a cavernous room filled with books bound in pale leather, or in the winter gardens, where black roses bloomed in the snow. Kirigan was always there. He fed her from his own plate. He brushed her hair. He treated her like a porcelain doll that might shatter if the wind blew too hard. "You are quiet today, my queen," Kirigan murmured, tracing the line of her jaw with a thumb. They were sitting by the fire in his private solar. "I feel tired," Alina admitted, leaning into his touch. Her body craved his proximity. The bond demanded it. "The wolf feels far away." "Good," he soothed, his eyes dark and satisfied. "The beast is resting. You need to let the amplifier do its work." He kissed her forehead and left for a council meeting, locking the door behind him. It was a soft click, barely audible, but it echoed in the silence of the room. Alina stared at the fire. "Why does he lock me in?" The question rose through the fog in her mind, sharp and intrusive. She tried to push it away. "He does it to protect me," but it lingered. A shadow detached itself from the corner of the room. "He locks you in because he knows you're smart enough to run." Alina jumped, her heart hammering against her ribs. She spun around. An old woman sat in the high-backed chair in the darkest corner of the room. She was ancient, her skin hanging from her bones like wet parchment. She wore robes of tattered gray wool, and her hair was a wild halo of white frizz. She smelled of dried sage, wet dog, and something metallic like old blood. "Who are you?" Alina whispered, backing away. "How did you get in here?" "I built this castle, girl," the woman rasped. Her voice sounded like grinding stones. "I know ways in and out that my son has long forgotten." "Your son?" "Kirigan." The woman spat the name like a curse. She leaned forward, and the firelight caught her eyes. They were completely white, blind, and milky, yet she looked directly at Alina. "I am Bagra, the Pack Elder, the Witch of the Woods, whatever titles the pups give me these days." Alina's hand went to the necklace. He said, his mother died." "He lies," Bagra said flatly. She stood up. For a woman so old, she moved with terrifying speed. She crossed the room and grabbed Alina's chin in a claw-like grip. "Look at you," Bagra hissed, sniffing her, fattened up like a sacrificial lamb, smelling of his stink. Her blind eyes narrowed, and wearing the collar, she flicked the black antler pendant with a dirty fingernail. Alina pulled away. "It's an amplifier. It helps me control the wolf." Bagra let out a dry, cackling laugh. "Control? Is that what he told you?" "Oh, you stupid, sweet child." She began to pace, her cane tapping a rhythmic warning on the stone floor. "Kirigan is not just a king, little wolf. He is a vessel for something much older and much darker than a wolf spirit. We call it the madness." Alina shook her head. "I don't understand. Generations ago, the alpha line of this family sought power from the barons. They wanted to conquer the south. They invited a shadow into their bloodline to make them stronger. But darkness has a price. It eats the mind. It rots the soul." Bagra stopped, pointing her cane at the door where Kirigan had exited. "He is dying, Alina. The darkness is consuming him. He has lived 400 years by draining the life force of others, but he has reached his limit. He needs a filter. He needs a creature pure enough and strong enough to suck the poison out of his veins and hold it." Alina felt cold. Colder than the snow. A white wolf. Yes, the runt who became a star. Bagra's voice dropped to a whisper. "He doesn't love you. He doesn't want a mate. He wants a garbage disposal." "No," Alina whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "The bond. I felt it. The mating run. Lust and instinct." Bagra dismissed. "Enhanced by that trinket around your neck." She pointed to the necklace again. "That is not an anchor. It is a siphon. It binds your wolf to his will. Once the ritual is complete, he will pour his madness into you. He will be immortal and sane. And you," Bagra leaned in close, her breath smelling of bitter herbs, "you will be a mindless beast. A feral monster roaming the barrens, driven mad by a darkness that isn't yours." "The rogues," Alina breathed, the memory of the attack at the outpost crashing back into her mind. The way the wolves looked patchy, rotting, insane. The ones who attacked Blackwood. Failed experiments. Bagra confirmed grimly. "Wolves he tried to use before he found you. They couldn't hold the darkness. It broke them, turned them feral. He dumps them in the barrens to die." The room spun. Alina grabbed the back of the sofa to steady herself. It all made sense. The sudden claiming, the isolation, the way he looked at her not with love, but with hunger. "I have waited 400 years for you. Not for a partner. For a cure." "Take it off!" Bagra commanded. "Take the necklace off!" Alina reached for the clasp. Her fingers trembled. She couldn't find the latch. I can't. It won't open. It requires blood to seal. And blood to break," Bagra said. She pulled a small, wicked-looking knife from her sleeve. "Hold still." Before Alina could protest, Bagra sliced the palm of her own hand. She smeared the dark, thick blood over the clasp of the necklace. The silver hissed. Smoke curled up from Alina's neck. The metal groaned, and with a sharp snap the necklace fell from her throat, clattering onto the floor. The moment it touched the stone, the fog in Alina's mind cleared. It was like waking up from a coma. The lethargy vanished, replaced by a sharp, crystalline terror. Her inner wolf roared to life, pacing frantically in her chest, sensing the immediate danger. "You have to run," Bagra said, wiping her hand on her robes. "Now. Before he senses the connection is broken." "Where?" "The doors are locked. The guards are everywhere." "Not everywhere." Bagra moved to the massive fireplace. She reached inside, ignoring the flames, and pressed a loose stone in the back of the hearth. The back of the fireplace ground open, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel that smelled of damp earth and rot. "The catacombs," Bagra said. "They lead under the mountain and out into the deep woods. It is a maze. If you take the wrong turn, you die. If you stay here, you die." Alina looked at the dark hole, then back at the luxurious room that had been her prison. She thought of Mal. Was he still alive? Was he out there? "Why are you helping me?" Alina asked. "He's your son." Bagra's face crumpled for a brief second, revealing a mother's grief beneath the witch's mask. "Because I loved the boy he was," she whispered, "and I hate the monster I let him become. Go, child. Run as if the devil is at your heels. Because he is." Alina didn't wait. She gathered her silk skirts and climbed into the fireplace, ducking into the darkness. "Wait," Bagra called out. Alina paused. "Your scent," Bagra warned. "You smell like him. You smell like a beacon. Cover it. Use the mud in the tunnels. Mask yourself. Or he will find you before you reach the tree line." "Thank you," Alina whispered. The stone wall ground shut behind her, sealing her in the dark. The catacombs were a nightmare. There was no light. Alina had to rely on her wolf senses. She shifted her eyes, letting the silver glow illuminate the path. The tunnel was tight, claustrophobic, the walls slick with slime and moisture. She ran. She ran until her lungs burned and her silk dress was tattered and heavy with muck. The air grew colder the deeper she went. She could hear things skittering in the shadows, rats, or worse. Bagra was right about the smell. Even in the damp tunnel, the scent of Kirigan rain and dark earth clung to her skin. It was nauseating now, a reminder of his manipulation. She reached a section of the tunnel where water dripped from the ceiling, creating a pool of thick, clay-like mud. Alina stopped. She looked at the filthy water. "Do it," her wolf urged. "Survivors aren't pretty." She dropped to her knees. She plunged her hands into the mud. It was freezing and smelled of sulfur. She began to smear it over her arms, her neck, her face. She rubbed it into her hair, matting the blonde strands with brown filth. She scrubbed at the spot on her neck where he had scented her, trying to scour his mark from her skin. She destroyed the image of the queen. She became the runt, again. Dirty, desperate, alive. She scrambled back to her feet and continued. Minutes turned into hours. The tunnel seemed endless. Just when she thought she would be trapped underground forever, she felt a draft of fresh air. She rounded a corner and saw a grate covered in vines. Moonlight filtered through the leaves. She pushed against the grate. It was rusted and heavy. She gritted her teeth, channeling a fraction of her alpha strength, and shoved. With a screech of metal, it gave way. Alina crawled out. She tumbled onto the forest floor, gasping the clean, biting air of the deep woods. The obsidian den loomed high above her on the cliff, a black silhouette against the stars. Lights were turning on in the towers. Shouts echoed from the battlements. They knew she was gone. A howl tore through the night. It wasn't a normal wolf howl. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. It shook the trees. It vibrated in the ground beneath Alina's hands. Kirigan. He knew. And he was coming. Alina scrambled up. She didn't look back. She turned toward the dense, shadowed heart of the forest and ran. She ran not toward safety, for there was no safety anymore, but towards the only hope she had left. Mal, Chapter 6. The Hunt and the Spirit Stag. The deep woods were not like the forests around Blackwood. Here, the trees were ancient giants. Their roots snarled like petrified serpents above the permafrost. The canopy was so thick it strangled the moonlight, leaving Alina to navigate a world of suffocating gray shadows. She had been running for what felt like days, though it had only been hours. Her human legs were failing. Her silk dress was gone, shredded into ribbons by thorns, leaving her arms and legs scratched and bleeding. But she didn't stop. The fear of the obsidian den was a whip at her back. He is coming. The thought was a constant drumbeat. Even with the mud masking her scent, she felt the phantom tug of the mate bond. It was like a fishing line hooked into her heart, going taut, then slack, then taut again. He was tracking the connection itself. She stumbled over a root and crashed hard onto the frozen moss. Pain flared in her knee. She lay there for a moment, gasping, the cold seeping into her bones. I can't, she thought, tears freezing on her cheeks. I'm just the runt. I can't outrun a king. A twig snapped. Alina froze. She pushed herself up, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She scanned the darkness. 2 eyes appeared in the gloom. Glowing amber, a wolf stepped out from behind a massive oak. It wasn't the sleek, terrifying perfection of the royal guard. It was rough, shaggy, and caked in dirt. But Alina knew those eyes. Mal, she whispered. The wolf whined a sound of pure relief. It shimmered, bones shifting, fur receding, until Mal stood before her. He looked wrecked. His clothes were stolen rags, his face was gaunt, and a jagged, healing scar ran down his thigh where the rogue had mauled him. But he was alive. Alina, he breathed. He didn't wait. He crossed the distance in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. He held her so tightly it hurt, burying his face in her dirty hair. He was trembling. I thought I'd never see you again, he choked out. I thought he had. I thought you were gone. Alina clung to him, sobbing into his chest. He smelled of pine needles, sweat, and the wild scent that was fundamentally safe. He's crazy, Mal. He's infected. Bagra told me everything. He wants to use me to hold the madness. Mal pulled back, gripping her shoulders. His eyes scanned her face, frantic and searching. Did he mark you? Did he bite you? No, not yet. I ran before he could. Good. Then there's still time. Mal looked around the dark woods, his expression hardening. We can't keep running, Alina. He will hunt us to the ends of the earth. He has the guard, the trackers. He has magic. Then what do? We find the stag. Alina blinked. The spirit stag? That's a nursery rhyme, Mal. A bedtime story. It's real, Mal insisted. I've been tracking it. Since I escaped the infirmary wagons. I've been living out here, listening to the whispers of the forest. The stag is the ancient guardian of these woods. The legends say its antlers hold the pure light of the moon goddess. If a wolf receives its blessing, they become a true alpha. Alina finished, the old story surfacing in her memory. An alpha who doesn't need a pack to draw power. An alpha who bows to no one. Exactly. If you find it, if you commune with it, your power could rival Kirigan's. You could break the bond. Hope, fragile and sharp, bloomed in Alina's chest. Where is it? Close, Mal said. He pointed north, where the trees grew so thick they formed a wall. I saw its tracks near the frozen lake. Come on. They moved together, a ghost and a rogue slipping through the silence. Mal helped her over the rough terrain, his hand warm in hers. For a moment, it felt like before the kings and the curses, just Alina and Mal against the world. They reached the clearing an hour later. The frozen lake was a circle of perfect, polished ice in the center of the woods. And standing in the middle of it, drinking from a hole in the ice, was the creature. It was massive, easily the size of a draft horse. Its coat was white, but not like snow, it was pearlescent, shimmering with every color of the aurora. Its antlers were enormous, branching out like a crown of white wood, glowing with a soft, pulsing light that illuminated the entire clearing. The spirit stag. Alina stopped at the edge of the trees, breathless. It's beautiful. Go to it, Mal urged gently. It's waiting for you. Alina stepped onto the ice. She moved slowly, holding her hands out, palms up. The air around the stag felt charged, heavy with magic that tasted of ozone and ancient peace. The stag lifted its head. Its eyes were vast pools of liquid starlight. It didn't run. It watched her. Alina. A voice echoed in her head. It wasn't a voice, but a feeling. A welcome. She walked closer, the ice singing beneath her boots. The stag lowered its massive head. It was offering itself. It was offering the blessing. Alina reached out, her fingers inches from the glowing muzzle. She could feel the power radiating from it, pure, untainted light. This is it, she thought. Freedom? Then, the shadows moved. A black shape erupted from the tree line with the speed of a striking cobra. It didn't make a sound. It was a blur of darkness that slammed into the side of the stag. There was a sickening crunch of bone. The stag screamed. A high, terrible sound that sounded like breaking glass. No, Alina screamed. The stag went down, its legs shattered. Standing over it, holding it down by the antlers, was Kirigan. He wasn't in wolf form. He was human, his black coat billowing around him like the wings of death. His face was a mask of cold, terrifying fury. You thought you could steal from me, Kirigan snarled, looking at Alina. His eyes were voids, bleeding shadow into the air. You thought you could take my power. Let it go, Alina cried, running forward. Don't hurt it. Mal charged from the tree line, shifting midair into his wolf form, a desperate snarl ripping from his throat. Kirigan didn't even look at him. He raised a hand, and a lash of pure darkness whipped out. It struck Mal mid-air, slamming him into a tree trunk with bone-shattering force. Mal crumpled to the snow and didn't move. Mal. Focus on me, Alina, Kirigan roared. He pulled a long, jagged knife from his belt, a blade made of black obsidian. You wanted an amplifier, Kirigan hissed. You wanted the stag's power? Then you shall have it, but you will take it my way. He raised the knife and brought it down. He slashed the stag's throat. Golden blood, glowing and thick, sprayed across the white ice. The light in the stag's antlers flickered and died. The ancient guardian let out one last, rattling breath and went still. Alina fell to her knees, horror paralyzing her. He had killed it. He had killed a god. Kirigan stood up, his hands coated in the glowing gold blood. He walked toward her. The look on his face was unhinged, a mix of triumph and desperate, starving madness. We are bound, Alina, he whispered, looming over her. By the moon, by the dark, and now, by blood. He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her head back. No, get away from me. Alina fought, clawing at his hands, but he was immovable. Open your mouth, he commanded. He smeared his blood-soaked hand over her lips, forcing the golden ichor into her mouth. It tasted of metal and lightning. She gagged, trying to spit it out, but he clamped his hand over her jaw, forcing her to swallow. The power hit her stomach like molten lead. It burned. It seared through her veins, a violent, invasive rush of magic that wasn't hers. It was stolen, corrupted, and now. Kirigan breathed, leaning in close, his eyes wild. We seal it, so you can never run again. He didn't ask. He didn't seduce. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, right over the scent gland, right over the pulse he had claimed days ago. And he bit down. It wasn't a love bite. It was a branding. His teeth sank deep into her muscle, tearing through the skin, hitting the vein. Alina screamed. The pain was blinding, white-hot agony that shattered her mind. But worse than the pain was the connection. The mate bond, which had been a thread, suddenly solidified into a chain of iron. It slammed into place, welding her soul to his. She felt his darkness, his possession, his absolute, crushing claim over her existence. It wasn't a partnership, it was a shackle. He drank her blood, mixing it with the stag's power in his own veins, weaving them together into a knot that could never be untied. He pulled back, his mouth smeared with her blood and the stag's gold. The mark on her neck pulsed, raw and bleeding, a jagged scar that would mark her as his property for the rest of her life. Kirigan wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. He looked down at her, panting, his eyes finally clearing, the madness receding into a cold, satisfied calm. There, he whispered, stroking her hair as she wept brokenly on the ice. Now you are safe. Now you are truly mine." Alina looked at the dead stag. She looked at Mal's unmoving body in the snow. And she felt the iron collar of the bond settle around her soul, heavy and eternal. She had sought freedom. Instead, she had been forged into a weapon. Chapter 7. The White Wolf Rises. The battlefield smelled of iron and ozone. Alina stood on the ridge overlooking the gray valley, the wind whipping her hair across her face. She wasn't cold. She couldn't feel the cold anymore. She couldn't feel much of anything except the burning, rhythmic pulse of the mark on her neck and the terrifying, abyssal presence of Kirigan in her mind. Below, the snow was being churned into bloody slush. The rebellion had started 3 days after the death of the spirit stag. Word had spread that the king had slaughtered the forest guardian, and the northern pack, superstitious and fiercely loyal to the old ways, had risen up. They were brave. They were fighting for the sanctity of the wild, and Alina was going to kill them all. "Look at them!" Kirigan's voice was a velvet purr in her ear. He stood behind her, his hand resting possessively on the nape of her neck, his thumb rubbing the scar he had carved there. "Traitors. Filth. They threaten our peace, Alina. They are fighting for freedom," Alina thought, but her mouth didn't move. She couldn't speak unless he allowed it. The bond was a puppet master's string, taut and unyielding. "Tell them to stop," Kirigan commanded. The order slammed into Alina's spine like a physical blow. The magic of the stag, corrupted and twisted by Kirigan's blood, surged through her veins. It demanded release. Alina fought it. She bit her tongue until she tasted copper. She tried to clamp her jaw shut. "Obey," the bond hissed. "Submit." Her mouth opened against her will. Her voice, amplified by the alpha power of the white wolf, rolled across the valley like thunder. "Cease." The effect was instantaneous. Down in the valley, hundreds of wolves froze. It wasn't a choice. The sheer weight of the command crushed their wills. Warriors mid-leap crashed into the snow. Alpha wolves, men who had led packs for decades, dropped their weapons and fell to their knees, whining in confusion and pain. Kirigan laughed softly. "Magnificent. Do you feel it, my queen? The absolute power? We are gods." Alina felt sick. Tears leaked from her eyes, freezing on her cheeks. She wasn't a god. She was a gun, and he was the finger on the trigger. The royal guard moved in, slaughtering the paralyzed rebels. It was a massacre. "Enough," Kirigan said, bored. "Bring me the leader." The guards dragged a man forward from the front lines. It was Jarek, the alpha of the Iron Pines pack. He was a good man, a father of 4. He looked up at Alina, his eyes filled not with fear, but with pity. "You poor thing," Jarek wheezed, blood bubbling past his lips. "He has hollowed you out." Kirigan stiffened. "He speaks to you as if you are a victim. Show him, Alina. Show him who you are." Kirigan leaned in close, his breath hot on her ear. "Kill him." Alina's heart stopped. "No. No. I won't. Kill him," Kirigan commanded, putting the full weight of the bond behind the words. The mark on her neck flared with white-hot agony. It felt like he was holding a torch to her skin. Her hand raised itself. Her fingers curled into a claw. The shadows gathered at her fingertips, his darkness, channeled through her light. "Alina," Jarek whispered. She was going to do it. She was going to rip his throat out with magic. The bond gave her no choice. Her body was moving, a traitor to her soul. "Wait." Kirigan paused. He looked toward the edge of the ridge. "We found another one, my lord," a guard called out, dragging a prisoner through the snow. "A rogue. He was trying to flank the rear guard." Alina's breath hitched. The bond wavered for a fraction of a second, disrupted by the spike of pure, unadulterated terror that pierced her heart. They threw the prisoner at Kirigan's feet. He was beaten almost beyond recognition. One eye was swollen shut, his arm hung at a wrong angle, and his chest heaved with ragged, wet breaths. But Alina would know him in the dark. She would know him in death. Mal? He was alive. Kirigan hadn't killed him in the woods. He had kept him. Mal. The word tore from Alina's throat, Bypassing the king's silence, Mal lifted his head. He saw her standing in a gown of black velvet, the stag's power radiating from her skin, the king's hand on her neck. "Alina," he croaked. Don't look." Kirigan looked from Mal to Alina. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "Perfect," Kirigan whispered. "The beta survives. I wondered why you were fighting me so hard today, Alina. You were holding on to hope." He stepped around her, walking toward Mal. He drew his obsidian sword. "Let's cut that thread, shall we?" "No," Alina screamed. She tried to run to Mal, but her feet were rooted to the spot. The bond held her fast. Kirigan placed the tip of the sword against Mal's throat. "He is a weakness," Kirigan said to her. "A reminder of the dirt you crawled out of. You are the White Wolf. You are the Queen of the Night. You have no need for runts and cripples. Please," Alina begged, her voice breaking. "I will do anything. I will obey. Just let him go. Exile him. Please." "You will obey anyway," Kirigan noted coldly. "But I want your heart, Alina. And as long as he beats, a part of you belongs to him." He looked at Mal. "Any last words, boy?" Mal didn't look at the sword. He looked past Kirigan, locking eyes with Alina. His amber eyes were burning with a fierce, desperate love. "You are not his," Mal said, his voice surprisingly steady. "You are not a weapon. You are the sun, Alina. Burn him away," Kirigan snarled. He raised the sword. "Goodbye, Beta." Time slowed. Alina saw the muscle in Kirigan's arm bunch. She saw the blade begin its descent. She saw Mal close his eyes, accepting his death. And something inside Alina snapped. It wasn't the bond. It wasn't the necklace. It was the part of her that Baghra had warned about, the part that Kirigan had underestimated. The instinct of the White Wolf isn't just to rule, it is to protect. The protection instinct clashed with the obedience command. The paradox hit the magic in her blood like a hammer hitting a detonator. "No!" Alina didn't scream with her voice. She screamed with her soul. She reached deep into the well of the stag's power, the stolen, golden light, and she grabbed it. She didn't pull it toward Kirigan. She pulled it in. She ignited. A pillar of blinding, white fire erupted from her body. It was brighter than the sun, hotter than the core of the earth. It incinerated the black velvet gown. It scoured the darkness from her veins. The shock wave knocked the royal guard flat. Kirigan stumbled back, shielding his eyes, the sword falling from his hand. What are you doing?" Alina stepped forward. She was glowing so brightly she was hard to look at. Her eyes were twin pools of molten silver. The mark on her neck was smoking, sizzling as her own healing factor fought the dark magic. She looked at Kirigan. She didn't see a king. She saw a parasite. "You wanted my voice," Alina said. The sound was layered, 1,000 wolves speaking as one. "You wanted my command." She pointed a finger at him. "I reject you." The words hit the air with the force of a nuclear blast. Rejection was painful for any mate. But a rejection of a bond sealed with blood magic, fueled by an ancient amplifier? It was catastrophic. The link between them didn't just break, it shattered. The backlash roared down the invisible tether, slamming into Kirigan's chest. He screamed. He fell to his knees, clutching his chest as black smoke began to pour from his mouth and eyes. The madness he had tried to filter into Alina was rebounding, doubling back on him with interest. "Kill him!" Kirigan shrieked to his army, his voice a ruined gargle. "Kill the bitch!" The royal guard scrambled to their feet, shifting into their massive wolf forms. They lunged for Alina. Alina didn't move. She stood over Mal's prone body, a shield of white fire. She looked at the charging army, hundreds of wolves, the elite of the kingdom, kneel. She didn't shout it. She didn't need to. She possessed the stag's authority now. She was the true alpha. The army froze mid-stride. The compulsion was absolute. It overrode their loyalty to the king. It overrode their fear. One by one, the black wolves lowered their heads. They whimpered. They tucked their tails. And they bowed. Alina stood in the center of a sea of prostrate wolves. She turned to Kirigan. He was crawling away, his skin graying, veins of black necrosis spreading up his neck. He looked up at her with hatred so pure it felt toxic. "You cannot kill me," he hissed, blood dripping from his eyes. "I am eternal. I am the shadow. You are nothing," Alina said. She raised her hand to deliver the final blow, to burn him from existence. But shadows erupted around him. Thick, oily darkness swirled up from the ground, wrapping him in a cocoon. "We will meet again, mate," his voice echoed, distorted and fading. "And next time, I will not be so gentle." The shadows imploded, and he was gone. Alina stood in the silence of the battlefield. The adrenaline began to fade. The light dimmed, leaving her standing in the snow, wearing nothing but tattered remnants of silk and the blood of the rebellion. Her knees gave out. She fell, but she didn't hit the ground. Mal caught her. He was weak, bleeding, and broken, but he held her. He lowered her gently to the snow, pulling her against his chest. "You did it," he whispered into her hair, his tears hot against her skin. "You did it, Alina." Alina looked at him. She reached up and touched his face, verifying he was real. She looked at the mark on her neck. It was a scar, now ugly and raised, but it was silent. The voice in her head was gone. She looked out at the valley. The rebels were standing up, looking at her with awe. The royal army was still kneeling, waiting for her command. She was no longer the runt. She was no longer the prisoner. She was the Alpha Queen. Epilogue. The obsidian den was empty. The black flags had been torn down. Alina stood on the balcony, watching the sun set over the mountains. It was a real sunset this time, orange and gold, not the gray gloom of the king's reign. "Are you ready?" Mal walked onto the balcony. He walked with a limp the leg would never fully heal, but he stood tall. He wore the simple leathers of a ranger, but at his hip hung the obsidian sword of the king, purified by salt and fire. "The packs are waiting," Alina said, turning to him. "They want orders. They want a hierarchy. They want a home," Mal corrected gently. He took her hand. "They're scared, Alina. They've known nothing but fear for 400 years. Alina squeezed his hand. She looked at her reflection in the glass doors. Her hair was white now, bleached by the force of the magic she had channeled. Her eyes remained a shifting, mercurial silver. She wasn't the girl who hauled water buckets anymore. That girl had died in the snow. "We won't be like him," Alina vowed. "We won't rule from a fortress of black stone. Where will we go?" "The barrens," Alina said, looking north. "We go to the broken places. We find the rogues, the cast-offs, the ones he broke. We build a pack for the wolves who have no one." She leaned her head on Mal's shoulder. "Kirigan is out there," she whispered. "He's hurt, but he's healing. He will come back." Mal kissed the top of her head. "Let him come. We'll be ready." Alina smiled. It wasn't a soft smile. It was a smile of teeth and steel. "Yes," she said. "Let him come." She turned back to the valley, her white hair blowing in the wind like a banner of war. "Next time, the wolf eats the king."